This is 15:20 GMT on Wednesday, 12th of August 2020. So we are continuing with the updates on the racist attacks on the migrants trying to cross the channel from France into England. And the particular focus is the role of the main council facing the arriving, stranded, threatened, under surveillance migrants at Dover. It's the Kent County Council. The Kent County Council is made of several smaller councils as a regional administrative kind of machine. And it has been at the forefront of the proxy role assigned to it by Boris Johnson and his Interior Minister, Priti Patel, in the war against the vulnerable, the poor, the desperate, the insecure, and the under threat migrants, mainly coming from 4 or 5 countries, according to current calculations. But essentially, these are people from African countries, North African, Syrian, Afghans, Iranians, and others from areas of extreme, severe poverty, hunger, starvation, and massacres like Yemen. So the role of the British state, or the role to which the British state has been placed by the Johnson-fronted cabal, is a role that is continuing to make wars, make famines, make massacres in those countries. And in none of the British mainstream media today, Wednesday, 12th of August 2020, is there any really significant, relevant reference to any of those. The main reference is to the migrants. Now, talking about them crossing the channel and being in desperate position is one thing, but actually relating them and their arrival to the pre-existing, predisposed propensity to hate and propensity to racist hatred and intolerance is the one that is actually concerning, because the idea that people who are seeking asylum or refuges in Britain are automatically landing in a society, in an environment that is absolutely perfect and safe and free and secure. Nothing could be farther from the truth. So we shall discuss the actual plight of the immigrants in this country, and we shall cover the last 100 years in due course and in incremental fashion in a number of editions. But the focus today is on the hatred being generated by Nigel Farage, the most racist and widest given platform for racist hatred and preaching of racist hatred by the BBC and other mainstream media. Nigel Farage is leading the charge against these poor, desperate people. And he is being followed by Boris Johnson and his cabal in posts as the current British government. And these people are using the conservative-controlled Kent County Council as the proxy instrument for that county council to give, as it were, frontline reports and accounts that fuel the racist hatred and intolerance and misunderstanding about the impact of the migrants seeking asylum or refuge in this country. And for the last few months, since at least from beginning in May, in the context of the pandemic, Kent County Council's leadership has been used to pump out absolutely emotionally charged, desperate pleas for funding, and with the threat that they will not be able to do the necessary to receive the migrant children and others that they seek the help of the local council at the point of contact with the country when they arrive in this country. Now, the role of Kent County Council and the role of the UK Home Office, which is the Interior Ministry, is very much connected with the obligations that Britain is under international law. And that obligation, or those obligations, originally start from the 1951 Convention on Refugees, which were updated and extended or modified in 1967. But none of the pronouncements by Kent County Council or Boris Johnson or Priti Patel, the Interior Minister, would give the observer, the objective person from Mars or another country, looking at these events in the UK, the idea that they were aware of the British obligation under law, international law. The impression that they would get is the impression that Britain is being charitable and it is doing charity, and that Kent County Council is doing charity. Nothing could be further from the truth. Kent County Council is not doing a charity, nor is the UK government. If the UK government is not to become completely isolated from the international communities and become a little England, marooned out of all contacts with the rest of the world, then they have to oblige themselves and the ministries and the local councils and the departments to do the necessary to help these children and the desperate people seeking refuge. As we said in the morning's edition of this channel, in diagnosing the British press, the Times has a front page piece of a refugee or migrant mother with her child. She's a lawyer. Now, a young person, a young woman, a lawyer, which means that she could make reasonably decent money, income in her profession if she could practice her legal skills. Obviously, the reason why she is a migrant is because she couldn't practice it. Wherever she comes from is too unsafe for her to stay, let alone practice her legal skills. So she is threatening, according to the Times, that she would jump or she would drown if the British don't let them in. And the British are not doing a charity, as I said, and the Kent County Council, the proxy in the war against the migrants, is not doing a charity by accepting any number of these migrants. And there is a kind of diversionary dispute created as a denial, as a part of the strategy to continue to deny the legal obligations that is at the root of all these kind of complaints by various parts of the government or between government departments and between government and the government supporting local Kent County Council. They are not talking about the 1951 convention. They're not talking about the 1967 convention. They're not talking about the other treaties that support and protect and shield these conventions from being violated by a signatory country. And Britain is one of the signatory countries and has been from the beginning. And that is not recognized in the so-called mainstream media, not on the BBC, not on the Sky Channel, nor on the ITV. And there is no recognition in the piece that has appeared today in the Independent, or in the last 24 hours in the Independent, which is an online outlet controlled by Boris Johnson's Russian chum, who has been made a member of the British upper house by Boris Johnson for colluding with him in propaganda for at least the last 20 years. And Boris Johnson became a kind of recipient of almost blind support by the London Evening No Standards Standard. I call it No Standards Standard because it is actually lacking in standards of journalism, ethics, integrity, and honesty, of course. So Evgeny Lebedev, who is the son of a former KGB agent, is the owner of the Independent Online. And he apparently employs kind of intelligent people. But this one, written by whoever is the intelligent person about the migrants, actually doesn't refer to the British obligation in international law. It is led with the headline that most people in Britain have no sympathy for the migrants. Now that is stupid beyond condemnation, because what that shows is that the line is that the British people are to be treated as intelligent, fair-minded, well-informed, properly informed, and aware of their legal obligations, social obligations, and their debt they owe collectively and personally to Britain being a member of the international community and international treaties and all the other benefits for a liberal, caring kind of society, or a society that should be made a caring one. So the Independent is normally not like the tabloid Sun and the Express and the Daily Mail in fomenting racist hatred and ignorance. But on this one, it is absolutely irresponsible because it says that the British people, most British people, don't have sympathy for the migrants. Question is, do they know who the migrants are? Do they know that actually Britain is the country that is receiving the lowest possible number of migrants that it is otherwise obliged to under its treaty obligations? So the Independent is misleading and racistly misleading, irresponsibly misleading. There are various organizations in existence, as I have said in the general narrative about this country. In housing, there is shelter. In so-called legal kind of advice, it's the Citizens Advice Bureau. And it's about poverty, it's the Child Poverty Action Group. And these are some of the highly funded and highly kind of promoted, quote, non-profit charitable organizations in this country that are supposedly the couriers, the platforms for conscientious thinking. But they are not. They are actual extensions of the narrative, of the force and the structure of the state that is run by whoever runs, or whatever forces run and control the state machinery at the time. And all of these, including the Child Poverty Action Group, Shelter, and this one about refugee action and similar things, they are never questioning the government, even when they know that the government is brazenly breaking the law. And they make statements, they spin their existence in order to get the money. They say that they're concerned, but they never say that they would be taking part in a prosecution of the government for breaking the law and endangering people, children. So today, the Kent County Council has been told that an organized effort is beginning to take Kent County Council to court for a number of illegalities and crimes and wrongdoings, including the incitement to hatred and breaches of the UK's convention obligations and treaty obligations, because the convention is one which is about refugees, but the convention is backed by other treaties under which Britain is obliged to carry out a number of duties, including safeguarding children, safeguarding adults, and safeguarding people who are fleeing persecution, whatever their age, gender, religion, or origin. So Britain is one of the biggest claimants to the claim. It is a leader in various international forums and this, that, and the other. But it is one of the biggest violators of the treaty obligations. And the fact that it is a function, a cause, has been caused by the absence of a rigorous, alert, awake, intelligent, clever, independent, campaigning opposition in Parliament. Having said all of that, there is nothing in the Socialist Workers' Party or the Communist Party that actually compensates anywhere near what is missing there. So there is a void. There is a bigger void every day in Britain in terms of society, in terms of carrying out the duties that a government should carry out to protect the population. But this government is not one that is known for wanting to protect the population. It is known to sacrifice the people if it can get away with this, as has been the case with the promotion, the resort to the herd immunity, HERD, herd immunity during the height of the pandemic so far, the height that is seen so far. The pandemic would have a resurgence in the weeks or months to come, is the opinion of most people that are studying the various data and various indications and everything. And so therefore, what the migrants are faced with is a society where nobody cares about human rights. And as I said earlier, there is a human rights committee, the Joint Human Rights Committee, which is chaired by one of the racists in Parliament who has been there for decades, who is Harriet Harman, the Labour Party careerist. I mean, she is a violator of human rights because she was instrumental in smashing up the anti-racist element in what was then the Commission for Racial Equality. Although I had called it for years Commission for Racist Enslavement. I was present at the birth of that organization in April 1977. And from that onward, because I asked the question at the launch press conference, where the first chairman of the CRE, that is Commission for Racial Equality, which I immediately branded Commission for Racist Enslavement. The first chairman whom I questioned at the April 1977 press conference was David Lane, a former Conservative MP who had been given this kind of excuse of a platform to get some money and maintain a profile. Now, David Lane was the first chairman, and he was the first of a series of racists chairing the organization that was supposed to be about opposing racism. So I had long-running, continuous engagement, controversy, and exchanges of total disagreement with David Lane throughout the whole time that he was in post. And at every meeting, every press conference that I attended, I was the one that was not given the answers. The others were quite happy to be timidly present and not ask any rigorous, demanding questions. So everything that is happening in terms of racism rising in this country, I had anticipated, I had predicted in the context of the state and in the context of the framework that is supposed to be in place opposing racism and racist behavior. In the current context of the pandemic, the Communist Morning Star has been running a lot of headlines saying that the BAME, the Black Asian Minority Ethnic, what a stupid phrase, that are being disproportionately denied care. And the number of people who died in the pandemic, there were more Black Asian minority ethnic people than there should have been in terms of population, in terms of proportion. And today, online, I have just seen a piece by Dave Hill, who was in post as a London kind of reporter for The Guardian throughout the whole period of Lutfur Rahman in place as the, quote, elected mayor of Tower Hamlets. And Dave Hill lied and suppressed and colluded. The whole Guardian agenda was to suppress the truth about Lutfur Rahman's wrongdoings as they were taking place. So they shielded him. And there was a nepotistic, there was a corrupt deal between the Guardian and Lutfur Rahman's fronted Tower Hamlets Council. We shall come to the details in due course another time because the details are quite lengthy and will be longer than there is time in this particular edition. Suffice to say that Dave Hill, his record is as a writer who kind of comforts people and panders to people. He doesn't tell the truth. He panders to people that he wants to pander to, and that is what he is doing today. He is promoting a man with an Indian name who is supposed to be a professor of diversity in public health or something. Apparently, he spoke to the London Assembly and he said that there are enough laws and enough instruments present in the British set of constitutional instruments and mechanisms for actions, safeguards to have been put in place to prevent large, disproportionately high number of Black Asian minority ethnic people dying during the height of the pandemic so far seen. Now, this guy, whatever his name is not saying that the government committed breaches of the law, that the government violated the law. He said he doesn't know why no such instrument was applied and no action was put in place to prevent the disproportionate number of casualties among the Black, Asian, minority ethnic people in the population. He said he doesn't know. How can he not know? If he knows that there are these particular safeguards and instruments that could be applied to prevent that kind of catastrophe, then the fact that they were not put in place means that there was an intention not to put those in place, those safeguards. So how can he say he doesn't know? And how can Dave Hill write that with a straight face, rhetorically, metaphorically, straight face? Although there are questions about how straight Dave Hill's face biologically, physically actually is when it is looked at, when he is sitting in a particular angle. Dave Hill has not told the truth for the last 10 years about Tower Hamlets, and he is not telling the truth today about the evidence that was given before the Greater London Assembly by this so-called professor of public health or diversity in public health. So all the agencies and all the experts that we have studied today are in denial. I mean, they are not telling the whole truth, including the United Nations human rights outfit, that is the refugee uh, brief. The human rights UNHCR that deals with or protects, supposedly protects the refugees' rights is not coming forward. And the reason partly is in the bureaucracy of the administrative relationship between the UN agencies and the member countries or signatory countries. What happens with the application for asylum that a refugee person or a migrant person makes is that it is subjected to various tiers of treatment by the UNHCR and the British Home Office in these cases. And they can take as long as they whimsically want to. So there is no urgency in the treatment of the applications. And this is a reason, as bad a reason as people traveling across the channel in risky boats and dinghies. The fact that people are in the country and in the land, on land, doesn't in any way make their life any more tolerable or bearable. So there is a desperate pressure on the people who get the clearance and into the country, but they don't get the final clearance and settlement is not guaranteed. So all of these are contributory factors to the destruction of the quality of life of the people who are fleeing and arriving in Britain. And that is not addressed by anybody, not by Parliament, not by opposition MPs, not by the Human Rights Committee chaired by Hetty Herman, and not by the mainstream media, and most certainly not by the absolute majority of the so-called ethnic related outfits which are mushrooming now because of the lockdown and the creation of the access to the online publishing. None of these is actually addressing the issue. Most of them are not aware of them. Most of them are ignorant. And the others who may theoretically be aware of some of the rules are not concerned about that because they haven't got the right orientation or the right mindset and the right attitude of compassion to their fellow beings. This program, coming from the Khoodeelaar campaign, is exceptional, unique on every level because, first of all, we have been publishing online and we have been publishing in hard copy for decades all the critiques and reports of a particular situation or crisis at the given time. And we have been doing this and we have been campaigning because of the absence of similar reporting, coverage, campaigning by the others. We don't receive any funding. We don't seek any funding. We do what we do with our own resources, whatever they are. And that is absolutely important internationally as it is important in the context of the UK internally. Because in the UK, all the ethnicity-linked operators, given platforms and given access to the media or whatever, are funded or supported by some kind of approval by the existing racists making the decisions. And that is the first point of departure. We don't depend on these people for any approval. We depend solely, absolutely on the evidence, internationally, objectively identifiable, transparently verifiable evidence. Doesn't matter what the ethnic origin or origins may be of the particular subject, that is the subject of the story that we are particularly covering or reporting at the given time. So we are international beyond the standards ever adhered to by any of the United Nations known international agencies, including, as we said earlier today, Philip Alston, who was the special envoy on extreme poverty and homelessness or housing. And we shall return to discussing Philip Alston in due course. This is a theme. The theme is that migrants and migration is caused by poverty and hunger, instability and lack of civil liberty and democracy in the countries of origin. Migration is not the answer to those problems. So the problems have to be solved, addressed, faced up to, encountered in the countries of the origin. We do not advocate people from Africa, Asia going to or coming to the West or Europe or anywhere else, or Latin America or North America. What we are saying is that the people in our own countries, Africa and Asia mainly, in the current context, contemporary events focus mainly on the people coming from those parts. The people have to be guaranteed democracy, guaranteed basic income, guaranteed basic civil liberties and access to the remedies through the due process. None of this exists in most countries for most of the people who are fostered with poverty and who are suffering from poverty. And in the case of India, the hundreds of millions of people are in that state. In Pakistan, more than half of the people are in low income or no income. In Bangladesh, the situation more or less the same. In Sri Lanka, the same. In Nepal, the same. And all the other countries in the regions beyond or in neighboring next door are in one way or another suffering from lack of civil liberty, lack of democracy, robust rights that are understood to be human rights, civil rights, democratic rights, political rights. These are the issues that the United Nations makes routine references to, but it doesn't actually take any action. So we are at a crisis point now in the world where the planet is faced with extinction because of the irresponsible behavior by the consumers and the warmongers, the war traders, and the proliferators of the weapons of mass destruction. The United Nations was founded with all these lofty aims on the 10th of December 1948, but the lofty aims have not been adhered to, have not been monitored, and have not been implemented, and nobody has been held to account for most of the breaches of the United Nations. And it applies to the plight of all the oppressed states and oppressed groups of people, oppressed regions of people, oppressed nationalities that are not yet nation states. So we are, as a world, faced with this crisis, which is comparable to the crisis faced by the world in the so-called Second World War. And I think that legal action planned against Kent County Council will be a signal of response to this deteriorating condition of human rights and violations of human rights and brutalities, increase in brutalities, violence, and unnecessary, avoidable casualties and losses of lives and securities and homes and all the others. This will be a sample. This will be an example. So far, the mainstream, the BBC, the Sky News, and others have not reported this announcement that we made today about impending legal action, court action against the Kent County Council. This is a matter of time before they will report, and we shall be coming to update in due course. This is now 6 minutes to 4 in the evening or afternoon, GMT, on Wednesday, the 12th of August, 2020. We shall be updating in due course throughout the day.